Searchlights sweep the evening sky behind a giant edifice of carved golden letters. 20th Century Fox. Fade to black. Deep space, stars glitter, distant and cold. Credits appear. 20th Century Fox presents a Brandywine production. Sigourney Weaver. Alien³ The number 3 appears in superscript. Inside the Sulaco, Newt and Ripley are comatose in their glass-fronted hypersleep capsules. In space, the armored exterior of the USS Sulaco slides past. Inside, an alien egg is anchored beneath a support strut. Mucus drips from its open petals. The bony, spider-like fingers of a facehugger reach forward. A glimpse of the parasite climbing Newt's capsule. The glass fractures. Green acid drops on the floor. The panel frosts as it's eaten away. A spark flashes from the subfloor. A curl of smoke drifts around a sensor. A heartbeat monitor. An X-ray shows the spider-like creature clasped firmly around a human head. Red blood soaks into gauze. A beacon flashes. Ripley's eyes roll up into her head. An interior panel explodes. Ripley thrashes in her capsule. A roiling cloud of flame billows out across the ceiling. The hypersleep capsules are shuttled through a tube. The capsules slide into a compartment. Credits, based on characters created by Dan O'Bannon and Ronald Shuzette. Story by Vincent Ward. Screenplay by David Giler and Walter Hill and Larry Ferguson. A locking clamp spins and engages. Produced by Gordon Carroll, David Giler, and Walter Hill. Directed by David Fincher. Ripley stirs groggily in her capsule. An emergency escape vehicle shaped like a puzzle piece detaches from the Sulaco. The view pans across to the arc of a planet, a bright corona on the horizon fading into heavy cloud cover. The EEV tumbles toward it. Text appears. Fiorina Fury 161, Outer Veal Mineral Ore Refinery, Double Y Chromosome Work Correctional Facility. Tumbling end over end, the emergency escape vehicle falls through the atmosphere. Burning hot, it punches through the cloud cover like a shooting star and hits the water. Fade to black. A bleak shoreline curves, the water a dismal gray matching the sky. Titanic four-legged structures like abandoned oil rigs are spaced along the shore into the distance. A tall man moves among enormous gantry cranes and hulking equipment. He strides forward, his coat and cloak blowing around him. He walks slowly among the old machinery. He's white, mid-40s with a shaved head, dressed in tattered layers of coats. He stops and looks, noticing the EEV floating beyond the shore. From his elevated position, he scans the beach. The wind whips the ocean into white foaming surf. A body lies on the stony shore. The body is coated in a film of black oil and swarming with tiny insects. The tall man approaches it and looks down. He crouches, then turns over the body. It's Ripley. She doesn't stir. Later, he bounds across the landscape carrying Ripley. The giant structures loom in the mist behind him. He carries her down an incline toward a structure recessed into the ground. A bulkhead door opens and the man carries Ripley into a room lined with showers, setting her down. Two men with shaved heads watch him. They hurry away. The tall man tilts Ripley's head and lifts her eyelids one at a time, checking her pupils with a flashlight. He gently slaps her cheek. She convulses. He helps her sit up. She throws up water in his face. Outside in the fading light, a group of men with shaved heads and ragged clothes rush to the shoreline. The wind and rain lash at them. Two more men follow, leading a group of oxen through the gusty wind. Later, a bald man with reading glasses composes a message in green text, reporting one survivor, Lieutenant Ripley. In a dingy infirmary, Ripley is laid on a stainless steel gurney. She's unconscious. An assistant hands the tall man a kidney dish filled with cotton wool. He takes some and wipes her face. A hulking white man with a shaved head, Frank, holds a lamp and peers into the EEV wreck. He finds the damaged remains of the android bishop in a plastic bag. Meanwhile, the bespectacled man reports Corporal Hicks as dead. The EEV. Hicks's face is a bloody mess, parts of his lower jaw ripped away, teeth showing through the gore. The bespectacled man types, dead, unidentified 10-year-old girl. Frank shines the lamp over an empty hypersleep capsule, the glass broken. In the infirmary seen from above, a hand holds an oxygen mask over Ripley's face. She stirs, lifting her hand feebly. The bespectacled man writes, "Request emergency evac soonest possible. Superintendent Andrews." In the infirmary, Ripley's eyes flutter. On the beach, the men clamber over the EEV. Frank pulls a blanket-wrapped body from the cavity, and they pass it along a chain. Seen from above, heavy ropes trail from 3 pairs of yoked oxen to the craft. On a screen in green text, to Fury 161, Prison Unit Weyland-Yutani, message received. Outside, a bloated sun starts to dip below the horizon. From space, the planet Fury 161 rotates into darkness. A man in a baseball cap strides into an assembly area 3 stories high. The prisoners lean over the railings. A black man with a shaved head and horn-rimmed glasses, Dylan, stands in the center, head bowed. The industrial space is cavernous and gloomy. He raises his black-gloved fist. The other prisoners copy him. Superintendent Andrews takes the center of the room. Andrews leans in. Baseball cap nods. A thin-faced prisoner eats a chocolate bar. The tall man and baseball cap look at Dylan. Andrews moves off. Later in the infirmary, Ripley lies on a bed. The tall man picks off an insect near her hairline. Her left cheek and eye are bruised. He picks up a hypodermic syringe and slides the needle into a capped bottle. Ripley's eyes flutter. The man swabs Ripley's left arm in the crook of her elbow. He holds up the syringe and squirts out the air. He places the needle against her skin. She grips his wrist. He slides the needle in. She tries to sit up. She fixes him with a serious stare, her left eye bloodshot. She stands barefoot on the tiled floor. She stands naked to the side. He walks over to a locker. Later, they walk through a gloomy tunnel. Inside a huge cavernous structure, the wreck of the EEV is slowly being winched down on heavy chains. It settles and the chains release. Ripley puts a hand to the wreck as she walks around it. She peers in through the access hatch, then crawls into the confined space. She shuts her eyes. Her face contorts and she squeezes her eyes shut. She lays her cheek against the empty hypersleep capsule. She sees a scorch mark and frozen streaks of molten plastic on the side. They descend a metal spiral staircase into the morgue. The morgue is an airy, gloomy space with a row of lockers 5 high. Clemens' assistant opens one, a posy of flowers wedged in the catch. With a grim expression, Clemens slides out the metal tray. A sheet covers the small body. Clemens lifts the sheet back, revealing Newt's colorless face, her blue eyes wide and staring. Ripley looks away. Clemens and his assistant, a slight shorter man, retreat a distance. Ripley looks down at Newt on the metal tray. Clemens and his assistant loiter at the far end of the row. Ripley touches Newt's eyes, closing the lids. She bows her head and mouths, "Forgive me." She puts her hand to Newt's throat and checks the skin. She presses Newt's chest, pushing her fingers around, searching. She touches Newt's chin, drawing down her bottom lip. Clemens' assistant watches from afar. Concerned, Clemens looks over and makes his way back. Ripley examines Newt's chest. Clemens stands across from her. He covers Newt. Clemens slides out a tray of instruments, snaps on latex gloves, and selects a scalpel. He looks grimly at Ripley. He leans over Newt. A dribble of blood collects in a basin. As Clemens works, Ripley leans in, looking haggard. The assistant sits on the steps, rubbing his shaved head and looking bored. His apron smeared with blood, Clemens looks at Ripley. He raises an eyebrow. He selects a serrated crescent-shaped instrument. He stares at her with a stony expression, his slate blue eyes cold. A flash of the tool biting into Newt's thorax. Ripley fights back tears. Clemens grips both sides of the long incision and pulls. Briefly glimpsed organs, Ripley flinches. The door at the top of the spiral staircase opens. Clemens looks up as Andrews and his assistant step through. Andrews sets his jaw. Andrews stalks away. Clemens ungloves. Later, the view moves through a gloomy tiled room. Cold light streams in through a skylight. There are rails along the ceiling and red stains on the walls. Frank and another man back through a door pulling a large cart. They hoist the ox up with a winch. Murph stares at the carcass. Frank hangs up his apron. Frank climbs the stairs and leaves. On the cart, Murph holds up a facehugger. An elevated view of the foundry, an immense industrial space lit by blazing circular furnaces. A prisoner turns a heavy wheel valve. Andrews files into the foundry, followed by Baseball Cap. They approach the fiery pit. Above, a few prisoners atop a massive gantry crane maneuver it close to the furnace. The prisoners and staff assemble. Andrews slips on his glasses. The crane halts. In the abattoir, bright daylight streams through the high windows. In the foundry, Andrews' assistant removes his cap, face sheened with sweat. The prisoners look solemn. The ox carcass suddenly heaves. Ripley fights back tears. In the abattoir, the ox shudders. Dylan advances. A stream of blood dribbles from the nose and mouth of the ox carcass. The prisoners heave two wrapped bodies off the platform. Ripley watches them fall into the furnace. A bloody wound opens in the ox's hide. An explosion of red as something bursts from the carcass. Ripley's nose bleeds. In the abattoir, something stirs. The newborn rises, shedding red membranes from its long swept-back skull. The prisoners raise their fists. The alien opens its mouth and the inner jaw slides out. Tentatively, the creature crawls forward from the bloody entrails. It crouches, stretches, then bounds off like a jaguar. Later, a pair of steel clippers sit on a dingy tiled backsplash below a foggy mirror. A hand reaches out and wipes away the condensation. Wearing an olive green vest, Ripley appears in its reflection, hair shaved to a short stubble. Clemens stands outside the closed door. A tiled shower room, rows of empty cubicles lined with dingy plastic curtains. Ripley stands alone under the hot water. Eyes closed, she rubs her hands over her shaved head. In the mess hall, a well-lit space with rows of basic tables and chairs, the prisoners sit in groups. Andrews and his assistant sit apart. A white man in a trapper hat talks with a black man with a cross tattoo on his forehead. Dylan glances across to them. He gets up and saunters over. He passes a prisoner with a black beanie and a childlike expression. The man with the cross tattoo, Boggs, looks down. Rains, the man with the trapper hat. The man in the beanie looks up. Golic looks at them wide-eyed, gruel dribbling down his chin. He smiles cheerfully with a mouth full of bad teeth. The two men give slight nods. Dylan gives Golic a friendly slap on the shoulder as he passes. Dressed in rough khaki green prison clothes with heavy laced boots, Ripley appears in the mess hall entrance. The prisoners around the room look up. Entering, Ripley approaches the self-serve table. Golic watches her, a nervous hand at his throat. He shuts his eyes and crosses himself. A young man with a teardrop tattoo glances around. Ripley pours herself some orange juice. A smoking prisoner with arched eyebrows looks across. Ripley looks across the tables and staring prisoners. Dylan folds his hands together and averts his gaze. Ripley approaches his table. She sits opposite between Teardrop and the smoker. Dylan removes his horn-rimmed glasses. Dylan has a scar below his left eye. The prisoners exchange glances. Clemens and Ripley loiter in the assembly area. He toasts her. She touches her shaved head and smiles at Clemens. He stares at Ripley. A giant turbine spins in a tunnel. In the gloom, Murph uses a long tool on the sides of the tunnel. In giant sudden sweeps, he scrapes dirt. He smokes as he works. He steps in something. He lifts his foot to reveal trailing strands of mucus. Crouching and using both hands, he lifts up the slimy material. It's a translucent, ragged membrane. It flaps in the wind from the turbine. He drops it. He notices a nearby outlet with a torn protective mesh. He stares. Something stirs in the darkness below. He puts his head and shoulders into the hole. The alien uncurls its skeletal body. He's slammed backwards. Off balance, he tumbles down the tunnel, heading towards the turbine. Blood sprays as he hits the blades of the turbine. In the medical unit, Ripley lies next to Clemens. She opens her eyes. She blinks and turns over towards him. She spots a barcode tattooed on the back of his head, just below his cropped copper hair. He wakes and rises, sitting on the edge of the bed. He smiles and looks away. He puts on a black sweater. He dons his bulky jacket and leaves. Ripley watches from the cot. She stares off into space as the lights dim. Elsewhere, scraps of red tissue cover the sides of a tunnel. A prisoner with a metal pail pushes past Andrews and Aaron. Clemens examines the outlet, gingerly touching the frozen streams of molten metal. Aaron and Andrews leave. Clemens frowns at the ripped mesh on the access pipe. Later, Ripley pulls away a damaged part of the emergency escape vehicle. Her fingers scrabble over a panel labeled Flight Recorder. Someone's perspective moving around the EEV. Ripley pulls at a panel revealing electronic components. She reaches in and extracts a black T-shaped module. She scrutinizes the device. Someone's perspective approaches Ripley's turned back. Clemens. He holds her gaze. Now, a prisoner settles a pack on Golik's back. Golic follows Rains and Boggs into a tunnel. Later, in Andrew's gloomy and spacious office, Andrews pushes an elegant glass of tea across the desk. Reluctantly, Aaron leaves. Clement adds milk from a tiny metal jug. Andrews leans forward with a black squeeze ball in his right fist. Andrews leans back, toying with the squeeze ball. He stops. Reluctantly, he turns and sits. Andrews hands him his cup of tea. Andrews paces. Aaron opens the office door. Clement hands him the cup of tea as he walks past. Ripley pushes open a heavy metal door. She emerges into an enclosed scrapyard. She pushes up a hood against the wind and rain. She picks her way among the scrap, skirting a vast tangle of cables. Seeing a hand reaching out from a hill of junk, Ripley climbs up. She digs and uncovers Bishop's head, his face an inert plastic mask. There's just his head, shoulders, and one arm left. She hugs him to her and carries him down. She wraps the android's remains in a sack. She slings it over her shoulder, Bishop's hand flopping loosely. She trudges through the scrapyard. As she approaches the door, dark shapes block her way. 3 men loiter in the shadows. Ripley slowly turns and walks away. The men follow at a distance. She encounters Teardrop around a corner who smiles, goggles on his head. She dodges left, but Teardrop grabs her. He pushes her back out into the rain over a railing. The others hold her down. Teardrop starts cutting at Ripley's clothes. The man with arched eyebrows holds her face. Teardrop pulls down his goggles. A hand comes down on his shoulder. Dylan decks him. Ripley stumbles back. Dylan lays into the rapists with a metal pipe. He smashes a prisoner over and over. Ripley stands over Gregor, the man with arched eyebrows. He sneers at Ripley. She belts him. In the tunnels, Golek high kicks a cigarette dispenser and grabs at the packets. Rains and Boggs trudge past, each holding up a crude sparkling torch to light the way. They pause at an intersection. Boggs checks a map. They stride forward, clutching an armful of cigarette packets. Golek skips along after them. Later, they stand in a broad tunnel. A row of candles. At the far end of the row, a candle snuffs out. And another. Another candle goes out. Rains trudges back along the row. At an intersection, Rains pauses. He heads down the side tunnel toward the sound. He follows another row of burning candles. Another candle goes out. He comes to a stop. A puddle of liquid lies next to his work boots. He squints at it. The alien rears up. Boggs looks around the corner to see Rains flailing against bone-like limbs. Boggs and Golek bolt back down the tunnel. Boggs tears off the grating from a pipe and they duck inside. Boggs and Golek burst from the outlet and run. Golek comes to a stop. Boggs snatches the remaining torch. Near a set of large metal doors, Boggs waves around the torch. Something is huddled against one of the walls. It's Rains, a chunk taken out of his forehead, face streaked with blood. Golek stares intently. Boggs moves slowly, looking around. Boggs looks up. The alien snatches him up. He struggles, his legs thrashing. Boggs' head snaps back in a spray of blood. The spray hits Golek. He looks up. Up above, the eyeless alien stares back, lips drawing back from its sharp teeth. Golok flees. Ripley lays Bishop's torso on a table and sets down the flight recorder. She closes the modesty curtain around them. She touches Bishop's face. She connects a lead from the recorder and hooks the end into Bishop's skin. Peeling back a large flap of Bishop's head, she inserts a skewer-like probe into his ear, turning it to make a connection. She plugs in a power cable. Bishop's hand spasms. One eye opens. He looks up at her feebly. In the dark mess hall, metal chairs sit upside down atop the tables. A huddled figure, Golok, eats feverishly. A round-faced prisoner, Eric, walks in with a stack of plates. He cautiously approaches Golok. His face caked with blood, Golok grins madly. In the gloomy mess, Golok holds the soup bowl to his mouth. Dylan, Andrews, Aaron, and Clemens approach stealthily. As Golok turns, they grab him. She yanks the cable. He spasms. Ripley turns off the work light and rubs her scalp. Dylan and the others carry Golok through. Ripley stands behind the curtain. Dylan stares at Andrews. Ripley. Gullick grins. Clemens stares at Ripley, later in Andrew's office. He toys with his rubber ball. She sits. Later in the infirmary, Gullick is strapped to a bed. They drink from worn enamel mugs. Gullick. Clemens uses a tongue depressor on Ripley. Clemens pulls across the plastic curtain. He prepares a shot. He draws up a syringe. He blinks back tears. She looks up at Clemens, then proffers her bare arm. Gullick sees the reflection of something dark in a chrome fitting. Across the infirmary from underneath, the springs of a bed push down under weight. Clemens slides the needle in. Gullick thrashes. Clemens slowly presses the plunger. Gullick's eyes widen. A dark shape looms behind Clemens through the plastic curtain. Clemens turns, the alien clamps its hands around his head. Ripley staggers back off the bed. Slavering, the alien bares its teeth, its jaws open, and the inner jaws punch into Clemens' forehead. Ripley scoots back. Crouched on all fours, the alien looms over her, its eyeless face inches from her. Its lips peel back. It opens its jaw. Ripley cowers as the inner jaw slides out slowly. Gullick stares, wide-eyed. The alien retracts its inner jaw. It sways for a moment, then withdraws, disappearing up into the ceiling duct, taking Clemens' body. Ripley staggers to her feet. Gullick studies the ceiling vent with his pale blue eyes. In the mess hall, Ripley runs. Andrew squeezes his rubber ball. Swiftly, black bony arms snatch Andrews up into a vent. The prisoners jump up and back away. Blood rains down, followed by Andrew's squeezeball, Morse. Later, in the gloom, a prisoner glances up at the vent as he mops the bloody floor. The assembly area. A hefty prisoner. Aaron looks up from under his cap. Morse. Ripley looks up. She rises and turns to face the group. Morse. Morse, a short Weasley man, turns to Dylan. Ripley looks around. Later, she studies a map in a grimy tunnel. Later, outside a set of Titanic doors, later, they enter a drum-filled storage room. David is mid-40s with high cheekbones. Dylan stares at a toxic waste chamber. Later, prisoners climb ladders into the ventilation system. More prisoners transport a drum on a cart. 2 prisoners sort through old electronics. He shines a working flashlight. A prisoner passes a metal pail up the ladder. Another topples a barrel and spreads the thick liquid with a mop as it glugs out. A prisoner clamps a mining flare between his teeth and climbs. Clement's assistant Kevin. Prisoners slather on the chemical with brushes and mops. Ripley and Dylan mop the floor. Suddenly, Ripley leans on the mop, breathing heavily. The prisoners carry buckets through the cramped shafts. David shines a light down a vent outlet. A strand of mucus drips from the torn protective mesh. One of the access doors seals. He flashes his light twice. A mining flare in his mouth, Frank climbs a ladder up through a pipe. He stumbles, the flare drops. It lands on the lip of another shaft. He starts back down. Something dark and glistening moves above him. He stretches out his hand as he tries to reach the flare. Delicately, he snags it between two fingers. Putting it back in his mouth, he climbs back up. Above, the alien bares its teeth and lunges. Below, Ripley and Dylan look up as the pail falls and hits the ground. The flare falls in slow motion. The flare sparks. Fire streaks along the main tunnel. The cloud of flames sweeps through the tunnels. Another explosion sends prisoners flying. A burning prisoner falls from a ceiling vent. Dylan punches a glass housing and twists a valve. It breaks off in his hand. He turns to help a prisoner. A prisoner staggers forward, silhouetted against the roaring flames. As Aaron and Gregor run, Gregor is knocked down by an explosion and his jacket catches fire. Ripley and another prisoner grab him and start beating at the flames. Teardrop holds Gregor as he shudders violently. Ripley locks eyes with him. Dylan runs in. Dylan lifts Gregor. Teardrop runs back through the inferno. Dylan and Ripley carry Gregor between them. A prisoner Troy calls to Teardrop. The bestial alien emerges. The alien stands between Teardrop and the others. Ripley seizes a blazing torch. Teardrop runs towards the storage facility. The alien bounds dog-like after him. Ripley follows. Ripley slaps the control. Breathing hard, she leans against the massive door. Dylan and the others stare helplessly at the closed doors. Dylan punches a glass panel, triggering the sprinklers. Heated by the fire, a metal pail buckles and splits as the cold water hits it. The prisoners stand dully amid the gloom, smoke, and water. In slow motion, they move off. Aaron moves through the smoke with his flashlight. The motley figures trudge away. Dylan comes last. Later, he stands in a shaft of sunlight in the assembly hall. A corpse with cooked red flesh lies in the tunnels. Aaron to Ripley. She stares at Aaron. In the infirmary, Morse shaves his head. Morse stomps over to the bed and starts undoing the buckles on Golik's straitjacket. Morse gives him a rude shove. Morse shaves. Gullick stares down at Morse. In Aaron's office. In a side room, Ripley watches Aaron as he types out a message. He hesitates. She wheels to the keyboard. She types, "Have trapped xenomorph." On another line she types, "Request permission to terminate." A response reads, "Message received." Another reads, "Rescue unit to arrive at 1200 hours. Permission denied to terminate. Repeat, permission denied." A hefty brown-skinned black man, Arthur, guards the toxic waste disposal chamber. Gullick approaches, looking up at the massive doors in awe. Arthur puts his hands on his hips and glares as Gullick approaches. Gullick looks down for a moment. Gullick cuts Arthur's throat. He flinches as Arthur topples. He presses a button and a panel slides up, revealing a wheel valve. Gullick scampers back. He cautiously approaches the dark chamber, clasping his hands in a submissive posture. He steps inside the massive space. He looks up, cut to black. The alien bounds out. Meanwhile, he sits in a cell with an enamel mug. He looks up at her. Morse. The three of them and Aaron approach the open doors of the toxic waste disposal chamber. Dylan kneels next to Arthur's body. Ripley leans back against the wall, appearing suddenly winded. Ripley clenches her hands. Morse glares at Aaron. They separate. Dylan holds his forehead. Dylan looks around. Ripley sits in the cramped EEV next to a pod. She clenches and unclenches her hands. She slides into a pod. Outside, Aaron approaches. Ripley settles herself into the white, sterile tube. He squeezes into the awkward space. Ghostly images of Ripley's insides scroll and rotate on a screen. He looks outside the EEV. He frowns. He looks across at Ripley. Ripley meets his gaze. The screen shows a blunt eyeless head. It has a row of tiny sharp teeth. The scanner flashes, foreign tissue type. Ripley unfolds her long limbs from the pod. She turns her head to the screen. Her face contorts. She squeezes her eyes shut and bows her head. Dylan holds a fire axe and addresses the remaining prisoners in the assembly area. David looks up. Kevin looks grim. A large man with a broken nose, Jude, looks down. The hefty man, William, points a crowbar. Bandaged, Gregor sits with Morse. Gregor's hands tremble as he tries to light his cigarette. David. Dylan grins. With new energy, the prisoners jog out, and one by one, climb down a ladder and through the gloomy complex. Outside the complex, a large rust-colored comms dish changes position. Aaron slams a key. She shakes him. Breathing heavily, he leans against the wall. Looking grim, she leaves. A new message appears. EEV data scan received. Expediting medevac team, arrival within 2 hours. Aaron sits down heavily and stares at the message. Another reads, highest priority, Lieutenant Ripley to be quarantined until arrival. He leans forward, the words, awaiting acknowledgement, repeat over and over. In space, a blocky ship travels toward Fury 161. A cavernous, gloomy hallway. Ripley steps through a massive bulkhead door and sweeps around a flashlight. The walls and ceiling are covered with metal panels secured by rivets, revealing exposed plumbing. Ripley explores further. She looks to her left and shines her light. She slowly makes her way towards another entrance. She sweeps her flashlight over machinery and large pipes, draped in cobwebs. Water leaks from pipes along a corrugated wall. She reaches out. She tears a length of pipe from a wall. She explores further into the disused facility. Holding the bar, she shines the flashlight around. Her light passes over more machinery and cobwebs. The alien crouches among the machinery, its long skull arched downward, completely still. She advances. She strikes. Her pull hits a fat bend of pipe that somewhat resembles the alien's cranium. She drops the bar. Swarming insects spill from the broken pipe. She quickly shines the flashlight around as she backs away. Turning, she looks up. The alien reaches out from a gap in the ceiling and unfolds itself, cut to black. Carrying an axe, Dylan returns to his cell. Ripley startles him. He gazes at the woman, glasses perched atop his bald head. Ripley removes her jacket, revealing an olive green undershirt. Turning away, she puts her hands on the bars and stretches out her arms. Dylan wears an intense expression. He stands behind her, gazing fixedly at the back of her neck. He swings the axe. Ripley jerks back. She grabs him. He slams her back. She falls. He heads for the door. Aaron and the prisoners sit in groups near the furnace. Aaron. Ripley rises and turns to them. David removes a cigarette from his mouth. The prisoners share looks. Kevin. Aaron wears a troubled expression. In a hallway, a lean prisoner at a junction box gives a thumbs up. William leans against the wall mouthing words. Gregor appears. Jude beats his head against the wall. The view moves to an empty adjacent corridor, then through the gloomy tunnels. David holds a sparkling torch. He peers into the darkness. Ripley stands in an alcove in a long corridor leading to the mold. A track runs along the floor. Morse closes a door, but it jams halfway. Clemens' assistant Kevin with a torch. He moves cautiously through the tunnels. A black bony tail lashes in the distance. The alien savages a man on the floor. It glances up at Kevin. Kevin flees. Elsewhere, Dylan looks up. The alien's perspective sweeps through the tunnels. Its perspective slams into a closing door. David stands alone in the tunnels with his torch and makeshift knife. Ripley waits with Eric and the lean prisoner in the trap. David discovers a wall streaked with dripping blood. Jude peers around a corner. The alien lunges. From its perspective, it bounds along the wall, then the view spins as it races along the ceiling. A prisoner closes a door after Jude and the beast run through. Jude bursts through an entrance and slaps the door panel. Clutching a pair of scissors, he peers up at the small inset window. The alien's long fingers smash through. Jude recoils. Jude and Kevin meet. The lean prisoner runs out. Morse stumbles into the mold. Dylan stares at Ripley. Outside the complex, The comms dish turns to track the incoming ship. The lean prisoner Troy stumbles nervously through the tunnels. David with his sparkling torch. He throws his torch at it. He bolts. The alien runs upside down along the ceiling. Morse runs. David slaps a door control. The door jams halfway. The alien lunges. The door slams down. Morse and Jude collide in a tunnel. Morse grabs the scissors. Chewing gum, Troy warily advances. Dylan paces in the mold. Her hand on the lever, Ripley watches him stride off. Nearby, Eric lingers clutching a cleaver. The alien's perspective moves slowly and smoothly along a corridor. Dylan advances. David peers through the window of his door. A dark shape drops lightly to the floor behind him. Drooling slime, the alien lifts its head. David turns. The inner jaws punch through David's head, shattering the window behind him. Ripley and Eric wait in the lead mole. Eric turns and runs, startled by the alien. Ripley holds him back. Her gaze pierces him. Ripley looks sick for a moment. Dazzling white floodlights shine through the rain and wind outside the complex. A group of people stride forward through the rain, while Kevin stands alone in the tunnels. Nearby, Dylan advances with the fire axe. Kevin thrashes in the air. Dylan grabs Kevin's legs. Dylan drags him clear. The alien pursues. Dylan drags Kevin into the mold. Ripley shuts an access door. Dark blood oozes from Kevin's mouth. The black, gleaming alien moves slowly into the corridor. Ripley and Dylan look up and turn. They back away. The alien withdraws, then lunges back out and drags the corpse away. Eric pulls the lever. Ripley barrels through sections, closing doors as she goes. The piston pushes forward along the tracks through the smoke. Ripley discovers David's corpse. The alien's upside-down perspective sweeps along the ceiling, chasing Jude below. Ripley discovers a pair of boots. A corpse dangles in her way, still holding a sparkling torch. She grabs the torch from the dead man. Jude runs. Dylan stands at a door. The alien chases Jude through the maze. Dylan flattens himself beside the door. The alien lunges, blood spatters, and it drags Jude back. Dylan crosses to the door on the other side of the piston and shuts it. Outside, the group in armor and white coats approach the recessed entrance. In the tunnels, Ripley pauses to catch her breath. In the shower room, Aaron jumps up. Armored troopers rush in. The man turns, looking to a dark-haired man in a coat. Elsewhere, Morse runs through the tunnels. He collides with Gregor. Nearby, the alien perspective shifts. The creature spots them and charges forward. Blood spatters Morse. Gregor stares, then slides to the floor. The alien descends on Gregor's corpse. Morse crawls away. A pair of boots blocks his way. He looks up. Ripley. She moves forward, holding the sparkling torch ahead of her. She swipes at it. Dylan runs. She continues provoking the creature. The torch goes out. Ripley reaches for the alien's bony tail and pulls. Dylan runs. Dylan grabs Ripley from behind. The alien's head snaps up, teeth bared. Dylan pulls Ripley backwards. The alien follows. Now it crawls along the ceiling. They reach the mold, the piston advancing. Morse slaps the door control, trapping it. Aaron leads the troopers and the man in black through the mess hall. Enraged, the alien bats at the piston as it's driven forward. In the foundry, Morse runs to a ladder. Dylan and Ripley retreat. The alien thrashes in the narrowing space. Morse reaches the top of the gantry crane and runs to the control panel. They scale the paneled sides of the mold. The alien follows. Dylan pauses. Then he climbs back down. Ripley from the top. Dylan removes his glasses and glares at the alien. Teeth bared, it rushes forward. Ripley clambers up into the pipework. Ripley waves. A gray curtain of molten lead drops from above. A torrent of metal slams into the alien. Morse recoils from the heat. The lead slows to a dribble. Ripley stares as a thin rain of molten lead continues to fall. The lead bubbles in the channel. Bruised and covered in scrapes, Morse stares wide-eyed at the roiling surface below. Something launches itself from the lead. Smoldering, the alien scrambles up toward Ripley. Ripley climbs higher. The alien quickly scales the pipes toward Ripley. Morse watches from the platform. She heaves herself upwards toward a sprinkler head. Ripley grabs two lengths of a hanging chain. She leaps, her weight opening the water valve. A heavy spray of water floods down. The cool water hits the alien, its oblong head fissures. It explodes into pieces. In slow motion, skeletal chunks of the alien fly through the smoke and steam. Ripley dangles from the chains. Morse maneuvers the movable platform and she swings across. Ripley collapses. Morse staggers away from the controls and leans against a safety railing. Ripley removes her jacket. The rescue team march into the foundry and file up a staircase. Meanwhile, Morse follows an exhausted Ripley to a chain-link gate. They step off the platform onto a walkway. She spots Aaron and the intruders. The dark-haired man steps forward and removes his sunglasses. He steps closer. A man in white. Ripley wavers, staring at him, her mouth agape. He steps forward and holds her gaze. She closes the chain link gate between them. Back at the controls, Morse moves away from the platform. The troopers line up along the fence. Morse takes the shot in the leg. Aaron backs away and finds a heavy bar at his feet. Aaron belts Bishop in the head. The troopers gun him down. He falls, eyes wide, his face drenched in blood. As he bleeds, Bishop clutches his head. She looks across at the human. One of the team holds a camera. Ripley looks across to Morse at the controls and nods. The gantry crane comes to a stop. The technicians and troopers watch from behind the chain link fence. The platform rests above the rim of the furnace. Her back to the furnace, Ripley closes her eyes. Then she looks up across the gap. She stretches out her arms. She lets herself fall backwards. She plummets toward the furnace. Falling and her arms outstretched, Ripley drops toward its fiery surface. She disappears into the roiling inferno. All the furnaces in the facility flicker and go out. A view of Fury 161 from space, sunrise breaking on the horizon. A heavy metal door closes and locks. A view across the dark mess hall. Another door closes and locks. Shutters come down. The troops file out. His leg in a splint, Morse hobbles along after them. He turns and looks back. A trooper jostles him. He gives them a shit-eating grin, now at the EEV wreck. Our view moves inside. Text on a screen. Weyland-Yutani, Work Prison Fury 161, closed and sealed, custodial presence terminated, equipment to be sold as scrap. End of transmission. The screen glitches, then cuts to black. Audio description written by Brett Coulstock, performed and edited by Kyle Warwick-Mathieu for audiovault.net. Credits: Ripley, Sigourney Weaver; Dylan, Charles S. Dutton; Clemens, Charles Dance; Golick, Paul McGann. Andrews, Brian Glover. Aaron, Ralph Brown. Morse, Danny Webb. Rains, Christopher John Fields. Junior, Holt McColony. Bishop 2, Lance Henriksen. Murphy, Chris Fairbank. Frank, Carl Chase. Boggs, Leon Herbert. Jude, Vincenzo Nicoli. David, Pete Postlethwaite. Troy, Paul Brennan. William, Clive Mantle. Gregor, Peter McGinnis. Arthur, Diobia Opere. Kevin, Philip Davis. Eric, Niall Buggy. Company Man, Hai Ching. Newt, Danielle Edmond. Remaining opening titles: UK casting Priscilla John, US casting Billy Hopkins, costumes designed by Bob Ringwood and David Perry, music by Elliot Goldenthal, visual effects produced by Richard Edlund ASC, Alien³ creature design by H.R. Giger. Alien effects design and created by Alec Gills and Tom Woodruff Jr., special effects supervisor George Gibbs, edited by Terry Rawlings, production designer Norman Reynolds, director of photography Alex Thompson BSc, co-producer Sigourney Weaver, executive producer Ezra Swerdlow. Credits continue. Copyright 1992 by 20th Century Fox Film Corporation. All rights reserved. 20th Century Fox Film Corporation is the author of this motion picture for purposes of copyright and other laws. The events, characters, and firms depicted in this photoplay are fictitious. Any similarity to actual persons, living or dead, or to actual events or firms is purely coincidental. Ownership of this motion picture is protected by copyright and other applicable laws, and any unauthorized duplication, distribution, or exhibition of this motion picture could result in criminal prosecution as well as civil liability. The title appears, Alien3, the number 3 appearing in superscript. Produced and released by 20th Century Fox.